Have you ever had an affair while you were still married? If yes, what made you do it? Curiosity or emotional need? Let me know in the comments below. I was already 34 years old when I met him. No one would have called me a looker, but men always gave me compliments. I'm not saying that to brag, but only to establish the fact that I wasn't desperate. So when the new neighbor moved in across the street and I saw him for the first time, I didn't even bat an eye. It was only when he started staring at me through his window that I thought something was wrong. At first, I just ignored it, assuming that it was just some kind of sick fetish of his. But every time I went outside, he was there watching me like I was a piece of meat. And it was so obvious that it made me feel uncomfortable. My husband didn't care, though, just laughed it off and said that it's probably just some teenager who has nothing better to do. But I could tell from the way my husband looked at the guy that he was really looking forward to a good fight. I asked my husband to stay out of this because I didn't want any trouble. But secretly, I wanted to find a way to get back at our creepy neighbor. So I did what any normal person would do in such a situation, and I installed a camera. When I watched the footage back, it became clear to me that I had been right about him, and he had been watching me the entire time. The thing is, though, that our neighbor wasn't some teenager, and he wasn't watching me because he was bored. He was watching me because he liked what he saw. But I never expected what happened next. Our neighbor decided that he was going to take things a step further, and he sent me a letter, which made me even more disgusted by him. I showed the letter to my husband, and I don't think that he understood what it meant. He just thought it was funny, but I was furious. How dare he write me such a sick letter? I remember telling my husband something along the lines of, "Do you see how creepy this is? Do you see how obsessed he is with me?" But all I got in response was laughter. I mean, I can understand why he thought it was funny. I would have reacted the same way if I hadn't been so scared, but I couldn't stop thinking about what our neighbor had written. He wrote, "You are so beautiful, and I would do anything to be with you." Well, I was still young enough to be naive and stupid, and I thought that it was a joke, but I didn't want my husband to know that I had received the letter, so I decided to keep it a secret. However, I also didn't want to go to the police and tell them about it, because I knew they wouldn't do anything about it. I also couldn't tell anyone else about it, like a friend or a family member, because then word would get back to our neighbor and things could escalate. So I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that S when I came up with my plan. My husband always joked about how I deserved the world and told me that I was too beautiful to be with someone like him. I used his words against him, or at least I tried to. My goal was to make him jealous, so he would put a stop to our neighbor S behavior once and for all. So I invited our neighbor over for dinner.
Of course my husband didn't agree at first, but then I just told him that it was none of his business.
Then he calmed down and stopped arguing. And when our neighbor arrived, I made sure to dress up a little bit extra, although I didn't show much skin. All I did was wear a tight white t-shirt and black jeans, and I left my hair loose, but it was enough. As soon as our neighbor stepped into my house, both my husband and I were silent for a moment, and I could feel my neighbor staring at me. I didn't say a word until he finally broke the silence and asked me why I had invited him over. And when he looked at me, he had this crazy look in his eyes. It was like he couldn't believe his own luck. When my husband spoke up, it was clear that he was jealous. He asked our neighbor if he had a girlfriend, but our neighbor just responded that he was single. Then my husband took a sip of his beer and said something along the lines of, "Well, he is a lucky guy then." But before our neighbor could respond, I interrupted them and said that it was getting late, so we should probably get to talking. That's when I started asking our neighbor questions about himself and his life. He was so eager to answer. He told us everything about himself, and he was very careful to hide his feelings from me. I could tell that my plan was working. My husband was getting more and more pissed off by the second. But I kept pushing, asking questions about his job, his hobbies, and his favorite TV shows. He answered all of them with a big smile on his face. But it became clear to me that he had come to our house that night to talk to me and only me. While our neighbor was talking about his favorite football team, my husband suddenly stood up and announced that he was going to the bathroom. Then he looked at our neighbor and said, "Make yourself comfortable," before he walked away. I wasn't angry at my husband for taking the bait, but I also knew that we couldn't keep this up. So after a few minutes, I stood up and said that I was going to bring the coffee into the living room. Then I turned around and I saw my husband staring at our neighbor. I knew that I had pushed it far enough. And when I looked at our neighbor, I saw that he was staring at me. The three of us were locked in this weird stare. Then I broke the silence and told my husband to calm down, but he just shook his head. That's when I realized that he understood everything. He had seen what I had seen in our neighbor's eyes. After our neighbor left, my husband and I fought. I told him that I didn't want him to interfere, but he said that I shouldn't have invited a guy like that over in the first place. We argued for hours, but it didn't get us anywhere. In the end, my husband told me to shut up and stop being so naive, but then he stopped. He looked at me for a long time and said something that completely changed everything. He said, let's just pretend that he doesn't exist and move on. But when I went to sleep that night, I couldn't stop thinking about our neighbor. I knew that my husband was right, but I couldn't help myself. The next day, I found an excuse to go to the store near our neighbor's house. And when I returned home, I told my husband that I hated him. He responded by telling me to get in the car, and we drove to the beach in complete silence. And when we got home, we slept in separate beds. I felt terrible. I loved my husband, and I knew that he loved me. So I decided that it was time to put an end to this nightmare. The next day, I went to my parents' house. I needed their advice. And when I told them about our neighbor, my dad got really angry. He told me that I had to do something to protect myself. I never imagined that he would react like that. And to be honest, I didn't know what to say, so I just listened to him and nodded my head. But when I went home that night, I knew exactly what I had to do. My neighbor had left his window open again, so I went to his house and knocked on the door. When he opened it, I immediately apologized for what had happened the night before. I told him that I didn't want any trouble and that he shouldn't come to my house again. He looked shocked, but then he smiled and invited me in. I refused, but he kept insisting, and that's when I lost it. I screamed at him and told him that I knew what he wanted. He looked hurt, but I didn't care. I just wanted to put an end to this. Then he finally backed off. To this day, I'm not sure what would have happened if I hadn't done that, but I'm glad that I did. After that, I never saw him again. Hey, thanks for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a comment below. What do you think? Why do you think I did what I did, or what do you think my neighbor was like? What do you think would have happened if I hadn't gone to his house? Thank you for listening.